Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Jayara. I'll not do that today. I'll do it. I'm doing things the wrong way around here. So right, we're starting chapter 5. I haven't got my computer working online, so I'll tell you, it works over the phone.
Chapter 6 today. I think it was 5 last.
And
Right.
yeah, so chapter 3, we spoke about where Arjuna asks the same question he's asking more or less in the beginning of this chapter. He said, you mentioned in second chapter about Buddhi Yoga using intelligence to understand that, we shouldn't work in this world, but, not get any reactions. And you also mentioned that, we should work. From in chapter 2, from text 11 onwards, Vishnu explained about the nature of the soul. That's like Sankhya or Gyan. And so it was alluding to that work in this world binds one. And then he said that, as a Kshatriya, you should fight. And then he started talking about Buddhi Yoga, using one's intelligence to, to avoid being attached to this, bound in this world through our work. And so at the end, it stated two things. So in chapter 3, he started saying, what first you state that we should renounce work, and now, which is best, work in karma, which seems to bring bondage, or jnana, refraining from work due to knowledge, not becoming bound in this world. And then so, then Krishna in the 4th chapter started to speak about knowledge, transcendental knowledge, properly understanding our position. And so he concluded in that same thing at the end of chapter 4. Just let me find it. He said, Arjuna was confused. Again, he says, in text, 16 to 18 in the 4th chapter, Krishna glorified knowledge or Gyan. And then he spoke of action, inaction, and inaction, inaction. Can anybody remember that? But then he said in text 41, concluding it, in other words, he was talking about how we can work without getting a reaction. So it's like no action, although we're working, although we're performing an action, or not acting and getting a reaction, because we have to live in this world and we have to maintain the body, so there's going to be some action. So it seems to suggest that, you actually work in proper consciousness and you don't get a reaction. And then in text 41, he glorified both knowledge, jnana, and renunciation. And in 42, he ordered so that more or less says that, renounce work in knowledge. Don't become bound. Then in 42, in the last chapter, he says, he encouraged Arjunas to fight. So therefore, Arjuna is like perplexed. So he asks the same question. First you asked me to work, and then you tell me to renounce work. Can you please tell me for definite which is the path to take? And so, if you remember, it was Karma Yoga in chapter 3, and but this one, in the end, in there it said that work with detachment, with detachment to the results. But it didn't really explain how to practically do that with proper understanding. So chapter 5 is doing that. It's starting to fill in all the gaps. What is the consciousness of somebody who, works in a detached spirit? Which is quite an intricate thing, we have to live in this world. And so therefore it's confusing. So just let me find the beginning. Here we are. Chapter 5. So this is called Karma Yoga, the same as chapter 3, but action in Krishna consciousness. So it's going to be talking about, the consciousness that we should work in, and how to understand how to work in that consciousness and the pitfalls of not working in that consciousness. He says, "Oh Krishna." Anyway, I'll let you start. Who wants to start first this week? We'll let Jai Krishna start again. So chapter 5, text 1.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, text 1. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" The personality of Godhead replied, "The renunciation of work in devotion, are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, Karma Yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both."
Okay, so stop there. Okay. What number did you finish on? Oh, just a minute. Right, we're on to 5. So read 5. Oh, wait a minute, don't read 5. Yeah, this will be all right. So it's talking about the same thing again, and but it's going into a little bit of detail. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the purport to number. Let's have a look. Here we are. I'll read the purport to text 1. Purport. In this 5th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, the Lord says that work in devotion is better than dry mental speculation. Devotional service is easier than the latter because, being transcendental in nature, it frees one from reaction. That means we're working for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the 2nd chapter, preliminary knowledge of the soul and its entitlement in the material body will explain how to get out of this material engagement by Buddhi Yoga or devotional service was also explained therein. In the 3rd chapter, it was explained that a person who is situated on the platform of knowledge no longer has any duties to perform. And in the 4th chapter, Lord told Arjuna that all kinds of sacrificial work culminate in knowledge. However, at the end of the 4th chapter, the Lord advised Arjuna to wake up and fight, being situated in perfect knowledge. Therefore, by simultaneously stressing the importance of work, and of both work in devotion and inaction in knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. Arjuna understood that renunciation in knowledge involves cessation of all kinds of work as sense activities. So that's called karma sannyas. You renounce all work. Karma means work. But if one performs work in devotional service, then how is work stopped? In other words, he thinks that sannyas or renunciation in knowledge should be altogether free from all kinds of activity, because work and renunciation appear to him to be incompatible. He appears not to have understood that work in full knowledge is non-reactive and is therefore the same as inaction. He inquires therefore whether he should cease work altogether or work with full knowledge. So we're going to talk about, as I said last week, that there's renunciation. An impersonalist will have a different goal, impersonal Brahman. So it's more difficult for him, and we'll hear about that later. But working, full knowledge of our relationship with Krishna and in the mood of doing everything to satisfy Krishna is non-reactive. That's basically what this chapter will be saying. And practically, even as devotees, we can be working in the wrong consciousness. I don't know whether anybody has realized that sometimes. And we become attached to the results even with unwittingly. And so, if we can work in the consciousness of remembering Krishna all the time and why we're doing things, then that solves the whole problem. But it breaks that down on a person's thinking from the beginning to actually attaining that consciousness in this chapter. Okay. Let's see what else we can say on this. Yeah, it says, so this is, anybody know what they call that? When we dovetail everything for Krishna's service.
Krishna Sambandha.
Krishna Sambandha, that's knowledge of the goal. Knowing what we're trying to
Yukta
achieve.
Vairagya.
Yukta Vairagya, yeah. In other words, we use everything. Yukta means to engage, with Vairagya, with renunciation, without attachment. He says this is better than any artificial renunciation. sannyasis, as we'll hear in a couple of verses' time, in the impersonalist school, they can't maintain that because they've nothing really to focus on. They're not really focusing on devotional service, which we can. They're having to, do mental gymnastics. And this chapter's a little bit like mental gymnastics. And but the end result is actually quite simple. Devotional service is simple to understand, that we just work for Krishna, but to actually put that into practice is not so easy. To develop that proper consciousness. Okay, we're on to 5 now, is that right? So these next 2 verses will be talking about how, Sankhya, or knowledge, renunciation, understanding the material world, which means renouncing activity, and devotional service are actually the same thing. It's like, one is renouncing, or one is understanding what the world is meant for, that's Sankhya, and the other one, devotional service, is then utilizing it in Krishna's service. That's all. It's just different parts of the same explanation. So we're on to 4 and 5. A minute. Yeah, 4 and 5. So who's next to read? Maybe Barbara can read it.
Yeah, okay. So where are we now? Number 5.
Yeah, but it sounds as if you're at the other end of the room.
Yeah, I've started it. I need to lose my place. So what's the beginning of the paragraph we're on, please?
You're on to 5.
Yeah. One who knows that the decision reached by means of analytical study can be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are.
So analytical study is Sankhya, and devotional service is called Karma Yoga in this particular verse. Okay, next one.
Merely renouncing all activities, yes, not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy, but a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay.
So stop there. So in this purport, it talks about these 2 types of sannyasis, the impersonalist sannyasi and the personalist sannyasi or devotee. And it makes that point that Mayavadi sannyasis, like I've just spoke about previously, they've actually nothing to actually get hold of. It's just all theoretical. And eventually they can only maintain it by keeping their intelligence sharp, by studying Vedanta. And this is what, Prakashananda Saraswati Thakur was doing in the Chaitanya Charitamrita at Benares. And they were actually trying to encourage, Lord Chaitanya, just sannyas, to do the same. They couldn't understand why he was, singing and dancing like a, sentimentalist. But, he's getting a taste from doing that. We get a taste from devotional service. And so that taste is the thing that maintains our service. If we don't get a taste, we won't be able to maintain it. So Prabhupada talks about that higher taste in the 2nd chapter. Vita Raga, not that one, it's get the Anyway, I can't remember the Sanskrit.
One who works in devotion, who is pure, is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. They're always
Gosh.
working,
Go on, although,
always working, such a man is never entangled.
right. So there's one line in this purport I've never been able to work out. I asked Jayadvaita Maharaj probably about 30 years ago what it meant, and he didn't give an answer, and he just looked at it and he didn't say anything. And I'll just read it. So, you know, it's talking about the qualities of a devotee which make him dear to everybody. Right?
Right.
Just a minute. Wait a minute. Wait, no, don't start reading again. And one is Vishuddha Atma. He has a purified intelligence. Viditatma, he is self-controlled. And Jitendriya, he has conquered his senses. So it explains how, you know, somebody who's in control of themselves, they don't harm anybody. It's only when we're not in control of ourselves that we cause harm to others. And so here in, I'll just read this part of the report. Because he is pure in consciousness, because one works in Krishna consciousness, he is servant to all, he is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. So what does that mean? And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. That means everybody should be satisfied by his work, otherwise you can't be pure in consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's the one I can try and assume what it means, because not everybody is externally satisfied with the devotee. Anyway, there's some people who are envious. So you know, it's specifically talking about. You know, I would say that it's because he's got pure consciousness. You know, he's not harming anybody, and therefore everybody's satisfied by his work. That's how I would interpret it. And he's a friend to everybody, even though they're not friends to him. He's everybody's friend, but some don't realize it, and therefore they're envious. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. So that's understandable. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there is no chance of being deviated from Krishna. Nor is there a chance that he will be engaged in matters other than the service of the Lord. Okay. So read another couple of verses, Matthew.
The person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and moving, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or operating or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is up from them.
Okay. So that's it's difficult for a conditioned soul to actually, we can theoretically read that, but to actually understand how it's working, that we're convinced that we're doing things. It just seems like, why are we being told that we're not doing things? But the thing is that the three modes of material nature are like the things that are making everything work in this world. And they're even working the intelligence and the mind. So, you know, when even if we get off the platform of thinking with the body and we start thinking that we're the mind who is actually thinking everything out, or we're the intelligence which is actually working out, you know, what's the best thing to do. But actually, it's, you know, the mind and intelligence are actually controlled by the three modes of material nature when we're in this world. And so, you know, we are watching, we are really the soul, you know, observing the activities of the body and the mind and intelligence working to control the body. And so, you know, we are bound to act in certain ways because of that. We can't act in any other way. I don't know whether anybody's realised that either. That we try to do things which are outside our nature, and we can't do them because our nature is controlled by the three modes of nature. And so, you know, the only choice the soul's got is really to use that nature as a service to Krishna. That's what it's actually saying. We may think we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing the other. And but actually the impetus to do those things are actually coming from our conditioning. Like that. Anybody like to say anything about that? To make sure we're all on the same page. And just going back to 4 and 5, it says, so, you know, analytical study, it means that we find the root of existence, right? And and then 5 means that we wait a minute, got the wrong one here. Yeah, we find the root of existence, that's one, and then we engage in the service of the root of existence. Just like we find the root of the plant and then we water it. So Sankhya means finding the root of existence by knowledge. And then Karma Yoga means engaging in the service of the root, which is Krishna. So coming to 7, this is a new section. And this is called Nishkam Karma Yoga. Does anybody remember what that stands for?
Is that without desire? Without
Yeah, it means that we perform Karma Yoga, but we don't desire the results because we're intelligent enough to know that if we desire the results, we'll get the reaction as well. But we still conditioned by the modes of nature to act in a certain way. We've not transcended the modes yet. What do they call it? In text 7, in the in the Sanskrit, it says yoga yukta. Yoga yukta. Yukta means to engage in our connection with devotional service, yoga. So it's the same thing. Okay. So read 8, Mataji.
One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the result or spiritual reward, is unaffected by simple action, as the lotus feet is untouched by water.
Okay, so that's number 10, isn't it? Okay. 8 and 9 together, that's why. So yeah, we may be, Jesus Christ, I think it was, he said we're in the world, but we're not of it. So, you know, the lotus is in the water, but it's not being affected by it. Its leaves are out of the water. The flowers out of the water. So when we act in this consciousness of Nishkam Karma Yoga or Yoga Yukta, engaging in devotional service without attachment to the results, we're actually in the world, but we're not being affected by it. We're not getting any reaction. That's basically what it's saying. And therefore, there's no sinful reaction. Sinful reaction means that we have to actually get the result of that by burning off the karma. So that means another birth. Okay. So we change readers. Anthony, do you want to read next?
Yeah. Text 11. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. Text 12. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me.
Okay,
Whereas,
stop there. I'll finish it.
whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled.
So this is the end of this section. Next 4 verses, they explain says the next 4 verses answer a question from Krishna already discussed in the 3rd and 4th chapters, namely, who is the doer? This is what we've been talking about. We're in the body, but it seems like we're doing it. And, instead of thinking that, the body's actually working according to the modes of nature. And even on a lower platform, somebody who's doing something without any knowledge, they'll think that they're the only doer. But it's saying there's more than one doer. There's actually 3. So we'll learn about that from 13 to 15. And also the next 2 verses after that, 16 and 17. So that's what we're going to do. But I'll just go on and say a little bit about 10 again. And 11. When we act in that understanding of detachment and we're serving Krishna, we realize it says that we're actually liberated even while we're in the material world. He works, he said, Iha Yashya Harer Dasya. This is in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Kamana Manasagira, Nikalash Babasta, so Jivan Mukta Sauchite. So when we use our body, mind and intelligence and words in Krishna's service, this is what we were saying before, we're using the machine in Krishna's service, and then we're actually liberated. We're actually observing the activities of the 3 modes of material nature, and we're using them in Krishna's service. So we're not caught up in it. We're actually sort of working the machine instead of being caught up in the workings of the machine by elevated consciousness. Okay, we can start 13. Start 13, Anthony.
When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done.
Yes, so this is a formula for happiness. If we want to be happy, don't try to be happy, in other words. This is what he's saying. Because if we try to, be happy, we get the reaction as well. That means we'll become unhappy. But when we're just, observing things and not being attached to the result, then we can actually be peaceful. I always think of it like you can see 2 people arguing, and then, they're getting angry at one another because they disagree. And you're calm because you're not caught up in the, in the argument. What the hell, why are they actually getting so het up about it?
Yeah.
But if you start listening to one side and then the other, you'll become involved, and then you'll start feeling agitated because you maybe start to side with one and not the other. So this is the formula or beginning of the formula for peace, you know, to not actually become entangled in the results of work. Okay, so it's all done in the mind. It's you know, it's called action ultimately in Krishna consciousness. So the whole point is to become aloof from the consciousness of thinking with a doer. Okay. So if 13 is a person who's convinced he's a doer, he's convinced he's the body, he's convinced he's doing everything, and that, you know, he probably doesn't know anything about there's a reaction to it either. But the next one is a higher consciousness. Is saying that, go on, you can read it.
Text 14. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature.
So then we can say, just like I've been saying, that the body's like a machine and it's working under these three modes. This is the platform we're on now. And we can say, okay, when I'm suffering, then, you know, people say, who's the master? You know, Bhagavadgita says, who's the master of the modes of material nature? If I have nothing to do with this body, then, you know, it's Krishna's fault. And people do, you know, when there's something untoward happens, they sometimes blame God. And so that's, if somebody who's on a lower consciousness, obviously devotees know better than that. Or they should do anyway. And so they'll start to put the blame elsewhere, that it's not their doing. I'm not, first of all, I'm the doer. Now I'm not the doer. So it's somebody else's fault. And the master of the modes of nature is described in Shastra as being Krishna. So there's another type of consciousness. So there's just two doers now. There's the one who thinks he's a doer, and then there's the modes of nature. Actually, the one who thinks he's a doer, in reality, the soul can desire to actually do things. And then the body and the senses are given to the soul to fulfill that desire. So that's how the first one is actually the doer, the soul's desire. Okay. Now we're on to 14. And read that one.
The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature.
Okay, next one.
Text 15. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume everyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge.
So this is saying that it's not the Supreme Lord's fault. He's just fulfilling desires. So, as we said in verse 13, that the soul's desiring, first doer. The second one is it's being fulfilled immediately by the modes of nature, which are controlled by Krishna. But that, you know, Krishna's witnessing the desire of the soul, and also is karma as well, is what he's desiring, what he's actually deserving. And then he's making facility to actually have that situation. So this is how these mechanics work. But, you know, even as devotees, we can forget that. Why are we in that situation? Why do we forget? Because we are anu. Anu means very, very small, anatomical. And Krishna is Vibhu, he's very great, so he can control, he's in control of he's not controlled by the modes of nature, he's actually controlling them. And so this is the reality of this, he's just fulfilling desires, in other words. And so then 16, this 16 and 17, they more or less conclude this particular section. So just read 16 and we'll change readers.
Text 16. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything. As the sunlight.
Yeah. Like the sunlight lights
the sun-
everything in the daytime.
Yeah.
So that's the effect of proper knowledge, is that, you know, we think, wait a minute, I can see what's happening here. And then we can start to work on it. Any questions so far? Let me just... So 17 onwards, it'll start describing, okay, so what are the characteristics of a person who's actually understood that? It's talking about the Supreme Lord, but it really means that the super soul representation, because a super soul is fulfilling desires. Yeah, so it's talking about the Paramatma now, that we're actually who's fulfilling the desires of the living entity. So what is the characteristics of a person who's actually got to that platform? So this is what we'll read on from 17 to 26. So 17, who hasn't read yet? Mayapur Chandradaya, you have not read them yet.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation.
So therefore, his consciousness is actually, it's clear. It's not misgivings, means, you know, he's thinking that somebody else is to blame. He doesn't understand it properly. But when you understand that science, it's actually the beginning of real determination. We're not bewildered anymore. So the next verse, it shows how he sees other living entities, how he sees the different living entities in this material world. He doesn't see on the bodily platform. We can read that.
The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater outcast.
Outcast. So these are the three modes of nature. You know, he's seeing the modes of nature working, but the soul is within the body. Like in the body of a Brahman, that's the mode of goodness, isn't it? In the body of a cow is also considered the mode of goodness. And the body of an elephant is the mode of passion. And the body of a dog and a dog eater is the mode of ignorance. So he's not seeing the outward activity, he's actually understanding that within that body is the same soul in conditioned in a certain different way according to the modes. It's a very elevated platform actually to see like that. Just a minute. Yeah, in Bhagavadgita it talks about the mode of goodness, how he sees that knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided in innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. Then the mode of passion, it talks about, we see the body, we see the differences in body, that's the person. And the mode of ignorance, we're not interested at all, we're just seeing, you know, how do we satisfy the senses? So that's the knowledge of somebody in ignorance. That's most people. How do I satisfy the senses of this body? He doesn't come to the point even of thinking that, you know, there's different living entities, and therefore there's some difference. You know, they'll say we're just two-legged animals.
Can I have a question, Maharaj?
Yeah.
Can you please explain more the difference between Vishuddha Sattva and material level of mode of goodness?
Yeah. Mode of goodness is part of the three modes of nature, although it's the best mode because in goodness we can understand things. We have knowledge of how the material world is working. And therefore, you know, there's certain parameters by which we work in the world to maintain that mode of goodness. You know, there's rules and regulations, rising early in the morning, eating food in the mode of goodness, giving charity, all good, all what's termed as material good things. But because they're in the modes, the modes are never completely pure, so it will be contaminated a little bit by passion and ignorance. In other words, by the mode of ignorance, you know, completely in ignorance, and mode of passion, like a little bit of the enjoying spirit. He says a person in the mode of goodness, he tends to be satisfied and peaceful. Also, he thinks that, you know, I'm in the best mode. He tends to think it's a little bit better than everybody else. So he's caught up in that way of thinking, and there may not be devotional service here. Vishuddha Sattva means that, you know, he's acting out of the modes. It's pure goodness. It's not contaminated. Why? Because he's serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's not a material activity. But from the material mode of goodness, if we get the association of a Vaishnava, then we can change it to the Vishuddha Sattva. It doesn't become Vishuddha Sattva straight away because we perform devotional service in the mode still. We may be in the mode of ignorance, but if we engage in devotional service, we'll perform devotional service in the mode of ignorance. So it doesn't become Vishuddha Sattva straight away. It takes time to get purified from the modes also. We can be still, in other words, we can be still conditioned by the modes, but we're engaged in that conditioning in Krishna's service. I hope I ain't confused things here.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what we're on now? 19. Carry on.
Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman.
Yeah, Brahman means Brahman effulgence, or in spirit, it means spirit. We're situated in the self, not fully in the self, but it's termed in the self. We're situated on the spiritual platform. But one who's engaged, not just knowing that I'm not this body, but I'm engaged in devotional service, then he's really situated in the self. So then he doesn't, he's peaceful in all conditions. He's not responding to the reactions and actions in the modes of nature. He's just witnessing them. How can we understand that? There's a nice verse in the 10th canto. Tatenu kampamsu samikshamano munjana evatma vitam vipakam vidvagva pubya vidadam namaste jivetamo yomuktipade saya dayabai. He says he's understanding that everything that's coming from him is residual karma, either directly residual karma or modified karma, which Krishna's, you know, is modifying it just to give us that karma we actually need to purify ourselves. And therefore he doesn't become disturbed about his difficulties because he realizes his reactions are actually meant for his purification. So he's always in the mood of, being he's always thinking favorably about the Lord, because he's actually kindly nullifying his material existence. It says if we can maintain that type of mentality in all conditions, it says then we become qualified for liberation. It becomes our rightful claim, it says. So this is what we're aiming for, to not react to the situation we're in. Does anybody react to the situation we're in yet? Does anybody get out of that? I know I do. It's just ignorance, actually.
All the time.
Yeah. Okay, next one.
A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence.
Self-intelligent. That means Krishna conscious, doesn't it? We understand we're not the body, at least. It's stira buddhi, self-intelligence. Fixed intelligence. Not mistaking the gross body with the self. We're not the body. We have to be fixed on the activities of the soul, in other words. And that's easily obtained by Krishna consciousness. We're just serving Krishna to please Krishna. We're on the platform of the soul. An impersonalist, he's trying to think, now what's going off here? The modes of nature are working, so don't get entangled. You're aloof from that. Just observe it. It's not so easy to do. Okay, what are we on now? 21, is it?
21.
A
Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme.
Yeah, so, as well as practicing practical devotional service, we can only, if we can't stay on that platform, we have to be conscious. We have to become Krishna conscious. Who am I doing it? Who am I doing this for? Why am I doing it? Like that. And, by developing that consciousness, we can actually, first of all, feel confident that we're on the right path, that Krishna is actually engaging us and supporting us and protecting us. And in this way, we feel confident we're on the right path. But then there's when we serve Krishna, when we go that extra mile to serve Krishna, or that extra foot, whatever it is, then he reciprocates, and we feel, some pleasure from that. So we're always pushing the border out a little bit more to try and please Krishna by increasing our Krishna consciousness. And that's where we get the reciprocation from my experience anyway. There is some pleasure anyway, just by virtue that we're maintaining what we're doing. Otherwise, the next verse says, in other words, we realize, the next verse says that we can only do that initially if we realize that pleasure doesn't come from sense gratification. So this is a famous verse. You can read that one. Yeah. Carry on.
An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have beginning and end, and so the wise man does not delight in them.
Yeah. sources of misery. So that's the sense objects. They don't look like misery, but they are. But if we try to enjoy them, then we'll realise the misery. We've got a little bit behind here, haven't we? Anyway, not to worry. We'll just do a few more minutes and then we'll stop. I have to go. Wasn't read yet. Sita, Takarani and Don. So maybe Don can read a couple of verses.
Hare Krishna. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme.
Okay, okay, stop there. Let's see. Let me see to Takarani read last three verses.
No, let Don read, please, because I'm a bit deaf.
Okay, let Don read it then.
Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Did I miss one?
Yeah.
Okay. So 27 and 28 is Ashtanga Yoga.
Yes.
So the next chapter will be Ashtanga Yoga. How do we practice it? And 29 is the goal. That when we understand the absolute truth of person, and that he's actually the controller of everything and the enjoyer of everything, you know, but most of all, he's the well-wishing friend in everybody's heart. Then we can, if we actually settle for that, then we, you know, if we actually realize that by practice of devotional service, then we'll be peaceful. It's a peace formula. But everything's actually taken care of. We just have to serve Krishna, that's all. Okay, thank you, everybody. So we'll see you all next week. Hopefully, anyway. And
Maharaj.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Santaraj Srimad Bhagavadgita ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.